What do you think about what Brian Johnson is doing in terms of maximizing age?
I've always been a fan of vampires, and the lore is great. I think Brian Johnson is doing a really interesting thing, which is he is trying to explore almost every potential avenue of slowing down aging, possibly reversing it in some sort of subsystem ways. And we're in a place where technologically, especially with biotech, our ability to like really change the body at a molecular level, cellular level, is like low in the grand scheme of what it could be. And so most of the stuff he does works on the margins. Like it definitely helps in many regards, but not by much. Some of the stuff he's doing, we don't know if it helps. Some of the stuff he's doing, it is probably true to say if it helps a little bit, and it just might not help hardly at all. But he has a really open-minded attitude and a very exploratory attitude. So he's trying to try all the stuff and cycle through, test on his body, see what works, see what doesn't, kind of a huge N of one sample. And I think, most of us don't have the, billionaire throughput to be able to do some shit like that. But he's, in a small sense but important sense, leading the way to getting people availed to the fact that, like, yes, some of the stuff he does is like very well established to help you age slower. Like, for example, getting really good high quality sleep and enough of it. So if you actually talk to Brian Johnson, he's like, yeah, like these pills and potions and powders, some of them have some real promise. Some of them, I don't know if they do anything, but I'm trying. But like the big rocks of stress management, of good nutrition, of having good body composition, of getting enough physical activity and of sleep, bro, he's got that shit handled front to back. What makes awesome YouTube clips for Brian and for the people investigating him is like, him waking up and like shooting fucking blue light at his face or whatever the fuck. And there's absolutely a situation in which like that might actually have some good ROI. But a lot of what he talks about IRL is like the big stuff: good food, good exercise, good sleep, good stress management. And those are the big killers in the sense of like, they bring a lot to the table with aging reversal. And so what I think he's doing is like, it's definitely quirky. But I think because he's popularizing the idea that you can do some things to like reduce how fast you're aging, it's really good for people to see that and at least put their toe in it, dabble with it a little bit, and maybe do some of the stuff that's more reasonable and a little less quirky, like get good sleep and get good food and all this other stuff. Take a few supplements that like, make sure you're not underdoing vitamin D and shit like that. At the same time, do you guys know what longevity escape velocity is?
I'm not familiar.
So there's an idea in the kind of futurist community. You guys familiar with like the Singularity Institute and shit like that? Do you guys know who Peter Diamandis is by any chance?
Yeah.
Yeah. Peter.
Yeah.
Our man.
He's got a podcast.
He does.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that we're getting more and more understanding of biological science, of how our bodies work, of how cells work, and especially leveraging AI. In the future, we're going to be able to have medical technology that is better and better and better, but not linearly, but exponentially. And that eventually we're going to develop a set of techniques that starts to reverse aging at various body processes and eventually have kind of a total grip on the problem. And so if you make it a certain amount of time into the future, because medical tech is improving so much, that if you take care of yourself, your life expectancy goes up by a little bit every time that you like live a certain amount of time. So like if you live another year, you actually add like a month of life expectancy to that at the back end. So like you didn't burn through a whole year of your life, you burned through only 11 months. In a few years from now, maybe 5 or 10, it'll be more like 50-50, where you're gaining 6 months of life back on the tail end statistically, and you're burning through just 6. But it's a year went by and you're like lived a year, but you're only taking 6 months off the end of your life. Typically it's you live a year and you take a year off the end of your life. Longevity escape velocity is when you can live long enough to hit that point where you're adding more than a statistical year to your life when you live another year. And if you can break through that, and some people are estimating that, these estimates have to be taken with an enormous grain of salt. There's lots of speculation going on, but it's not entirely baseless, that maybe sometime in maybe the late 2030s, we'll hit longevity escape velocity, in the sense that into the 2040s, it may be realistically feasible that if you don't get hit by a bus, you don't have to die in any understanding of approximately hundreds of years, perhaps longer, and that age reversal might be something we can finally legit do. It's been done to some extent pretty reliably in cell cultures, but scaling things from cell cultures and parts of an animal brain to like the whole animal as an adult, a complex systems problem that we just we can't get our claws into. But AI is going to be like, like hundreds of times smarter than us here in like a few years or whatever. And so people suspect that we might be able to crack age reversal. And so what this would look like in practice, and cue the wacky shit, is you might go to the doctors in 2038 or some shit like that. And they're like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Give you a shot. You go home, you feel the same, you look the same. You wake up and like, I'll look the fucking same. A few days later, you're like, well, lines on my face are kind of going away. I feel like I have a bit more energy. And then like a month or two later, you look and feel, and every cell in your body is functionally 22 years old. That might be realistic. There's no reason to suspect it's impossible on mechanistic grounds. It's tractable, but it's an intense complex systems problem. And if humans had to solve it themselves, we might get there eventually in 50 or 100 years with like half the GDP dedicated to that. But empowered by AI, for AI, things that to us seem to be completely intractable, to AI, especially in the future when it gets really, 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 really smart, if it chooses not to toast all of us Terminator style, to that, reverse aging can seem like a really nominal problem that like 2 days of, GPU cluster work later, they're like, yeah, we have like 5 candidate drugs that you can take now that'll probably reverse your age. And that is a thing that could happen. And so a lot of people, like Brian Johnson, are trying to be like, just don't die right now if you can help it, because in the future you may not have to die. And there's other crazy shit, like when we finally get AI to scan our brains and decode the natural intelligence processes, they might be able to like copy your brain to the cloud. And so you just like live in a fantasy world inside of a computer, and you continue on, even though your biological body that just got toasted or something like that. Wacky stuff. And I get a ton of shit in the comments for all the stuff that I say all the time. But probably what I assess is some of the smartest people, period, in exactly the industries that deal with this kind of thing, like AI, are becoming more and more open to the idea that these are now realistic, potentially possible things. And so none of this is really my ideas. It's just like other people that are smarter than me.
What do you think is realistic?
In which specific regard?
In terms of longevity and how long a human could live.
I think if you master aging reversal and aging no longer kills humans, there's no reason to suspect that you can't just continue to exist indefinitely. Like if you just stay 22 all the time, the thing is your body's just not designed to live a long time. And it's not because it like intentionally kills you at some point. Aging doesn't seem to be a thing your body like does to you. Aging is just your body being like, well, we've been around longer than is generally evolutionarily necessary, so I'm just going to smoke a cig and let you fucking deteriorate. And so if we re-engineer the human body so that it no longer deteriorates, there's no reason to suspect it's going to deteriorate. You could just continue to persist. But my own personal opinion is that we won't have to be alive a long time in our biological bodies. I suspect that plus or minus at some point into the 2040s and maybe even sooner, brain-machine interface, which Elon is already working on and fucking works in insanely amazing ways. You're like, holy shit, that guy's really like controlling something outside with his brain. Once we get a bit more of a bite on that problem and the exponents start going, that I think that brain scanning and brain cloud uploading will be realistic in probably the early 2040s, if I had to guess. And then you can just choose to, in human term of lifespan, never die. And all kinds of really wacky stuff happens after that. I think we're living through a transition that is, by analogy, tantamount to like when DNA was just free floating and it finally got some macromolecules like proteins around it, or when that agglomeration developed a cell wall and started to have like a cell exterior, or when single cells started working together in a multicellular organism, or when humans first teamed up and or primates, proto-humans started becoming very social and having complex societies. I think we're in one of those leaps right now with the birth of AI, that we are seeing the, not birth of, because there's already a lot of machines around, but the flowering of a machine civilization. And when machines are substantially several orders of magnitude smarter than biological humans, I think the limitations that we know just completely exit. And as long as the machines don't just toast all of us, there's a good reason to believe they won't. I think that there's a high probability that problems we consider like a part of the human condition can just be like really easily handled. By analogy, what do you think your dog thinks of as far as like, how come it lives in a climate controlled setting and never has to hunt anymore? Well, the thing is, dogs are so unintelligent compared to humans, they don't even have the referential ability to appreciate the fact that they're dogs, the fact that they evolved for something, the fact that they'd usually be hunting. That's beyond them. They can't even appreciate that they live in fucking paradise because humans just decided like, we're going to just save a ton of you and give you like a bulldog's life is like, you just get treated like a king until the day you die. You don't die for a long time, but dogs out in the wild live a few years. Dogs in human captivity, so to speak, or human cooperation live like a decade or something. And like as your bulldog hurts his leg, what happens out in the wild? He just limps until something fucking kills him, or he just starves to death. When your bulldog, hurts his leg here, you take him to the vet and they do like the most advanced hyper surgery you've ever seen. And $10,000 later, Wolfie's back to square one. And so the way AI is going to be able to ascend humanity, should it choose, is tantamount to how humans ascend dogs in a way that just sounds like magic.